With Civilization 7 mere days away, I had the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that few will ever experience. The opportunity to look back and contrast the life cycle of Civilization 6 and the life cycle of my channel. But as I spent hours tossing and turning, attempting to come to terms with one critical question, I had an epiphany that left me gutted, with a canyon-sized pit in my stomach. I haven't left my mark on Civilization 6. Make no mistake, I have accomplished everything this game has to offer, languished at events not going my way, suffered the bitter taste of defeat, beamed at my improbable comebacks, and repeatedly beat the game with every leader, including modded. But I've never done anything that I could truly claim I pioneered. All my guides, my unbelievable amount of money-making tier lists, my playthroughs and editing styles, all of which were to some extent copied from more successful channels. I need to make my mark on this game before the wheels of time turn once more and leave Civilization 6 as just another relic of time. And through that personal journey, I've discovered not just one, but two events that will no doubt cap off this incredible near 10-year run under my terms. The first of which will be revealed at the end of this video. To stream myself going undefeated in an attempt to beat this game with every leader and persona within the week. But today's focus is on the second. Today I'm gonna turn back the clock and redeem my biggest failure, to stand tall against every leader in Civilization 6 and not just win, but triumph by completely eliminating each and every one. This will be the biggest challenge in Civilization history, and to aid me in this gargantuan struggle is one tool that may leave you all enraged at its mere mention, the God mod. But it's not for what you think. This won't be used to cheat myself an advantage, no, because this tool is the only reason that this entire challenge is even possible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. With the shadow of the unhandled exception still looming large, we have about 220 turns to conquer the world. For reference, that is about the fastest you can win a standard game of Civilization with just 8 civs instead of today's 62. This won't be easy, but it will be possible because of the two facts separating me from all the other leaders in this game. I was empty, and needed to fill that emptiness with the weight of an entire world. However, we have to temper our expectations, as every story has humble beginnings. And so we get to the second fact separating me from every other civ in the game. We are vulnerable. Not only do we control just one city to everybody else's 3 that will no doubt fill up the map in less than 5 turns, but any build-up will necessitate a disregard of all ethics and morals, since any build-up will have to come at the expense of others. If we don't attempt a risky move, we will lag too far behind everyone else and end this challenge, reaching ahead as a footnote of history. To avoid that reality, we needed to simultaneously secure a power base, while preferably slowing down all the other leaders in our immediate area. But who are those leaders? Hungary lies due north, while Theodora claims strategic control of the Bosphorus. But our most interesting opponent is Gorgo, with her unaccompanied settler just begging to join our empire. But it wasn't meant to be, as she crushed our hopes by settling Bucharest, which is what made victory all the more sweet when she moved her next settler right into the waiting clutches of our starting warrior. This was of course brimming with risk. If we do attack, she could storm our one capital and we'd die immediately to the deity swarm. But with our backs to the wall and time running out, this risk was the safe option. We quickly attempt to make evasive maneuvers, but she isn't going to allow such a valuable unit to slip through her grasp without a fight. And that is how our warrior slowly got chipped away, turn after turn, as he got closer and closer to death. And of course for us, ultimate defeat. But despite the unrelenting assault, the rough terrain provides just enough cover for us to escape by the skin of our teeth. Tired, starving, and surrounded, we have nowhere to move but south. And so what would the southern peninsula contain? Another city, barbarians to finish off what Gorgo started. To be safe, we move in the warrior as a sacrificial lamb and discover nothing. Excellent. Allowing us the joy and wonder of settling our second city in this game, expanding our power base all throughout the Greek peninsula. But while we have successfully kept the AI from pulling too far ahead, our weakening of Gorgo may have just set about a turn of events that will end in our downfall. Hungary is coming in for the kill, and his capture of the most powerful city in the Balkans endangers our careful balance of power. But no one is focusing on that fact, as my neighbors hate that I declared war with no casus belli, and so it falls on us to prepare for the worst case scenario. First, by building a number of units to defend against any Hungarian aggression and to maybe snipe the city if we sense an opportunity. But beyond that, we need a third city as insurance, and the only neighbor who has their hands full thanks to numerous angry Turks is the one who slanders. Using this newfound opportunity, I quickly make peace with Gorgo, who herself was on the counterattack against Hungary, the security of which gave me the confidence to send my forces on a cross-border raid into Byzantium, goading her into war. While many hated this move, everyone already has their hands full dealing with wars of consolidation of their own to come and stop me, as I use my fortified position and the fact that Byzantium has bigger problems to deal with to snag another settler. And with our spoils in tow, we quickly retreat past Byzantine territory and extort the queen, who's only just barely recovered against what she calls the Turkish barbarians. But this entire saga may have been for nothing, as we have nowhere to settle, and so this settler will be forced to park in Sparta until it would eventually fulfill its destiny as the single most important settle of this game. But this lack of immediate colonies is terrible. With everyone looking to improve their position and both our cities on the coast, suddenly every civilization has the potential to bring doom and terror to our peaceful nation. In order to survive, we have to do away with our previous strategy of quantity to instead focus on discipline, training, and advanced weaponry to become the Prussia of the Balkans. Thankfully, we're blessed with more iron than we can use, and so we can afford to have blacksmiths experiment freely with this new resource, and look to not only make use of the iron for regular swordsmen, but to improve upon it further and create something that's truly Macedonian. Until then, we need to train our forces, and so we establish training encampments throughout our empire to serve as a rallying point for our recruits, which we will need to muster sooner rather than later, as the world is still engulfed in war. With Byzantium's weakness, Rome and Hungary's bloody struggle, and Bucharest's river providing growth and power to whoever controls it, it was only a matter of time before Greece became the one to unite a reeling Eastern Europe. But instead of uniting against her, Theodora still insists that I'm the real enemy. We were alone, and so needed to put an ace up our sleeve, something that no other civ has. And after the encampment opened for business, we finally found it. Funding a school, a Basilokoipides, that will serve to not only train our elite army, but to act as a hub for technological advancements. And all of that would soon bear fruit, as our army has just realized a fact that no other did. The fact that it was very difficult to get close to your enemy when his spear is longer than yours. And with the Apaspist, Macedon was ahead of every other Balkan nation in regards to military technology. Well, all but one. The barbarians that Theodora has bravely stood firmly against had returned, but surely she'd be able to a blow to the city. Try as they might to fortify their capital, it was already too late. And within 2 turns, the Ottoman Empire had entered the power struggle as the strongest civilization in our Eastern European bond, one that posed imminent danger to every one of the squabbling fiefdoms in the Balkans. Because after taking the city of the world's desire, we were now eyeing what could soon be an unrelenting avalanche that would sink the entire world. To prepare against this rising tide while it was still a snowball, we needed to beef up our own power base, and that requires more resources and thus more cities to form a united front. But the question is, who would unite this front amongst the sea of squabbling states? Well, with our preceding defensive efforts resulting in an enormous, well-equipped and well-drilled army, who else could it be? But the Greeks didn't see it that way, which was unfortunate as they held the crossroads of the Balkans in their hands. The time for diplomacy was now behind us. It was time to unite the Greeks to stand against the Turkish threat. But with an unending line of forested hills protecting the jewel of the Danube, attacking was a daunting task, so we took a different approach, baiting the Greeks who mistook our patience for hesitancy and forewent their defensive positions to launch ill-advised attacks of their own. But what they didn't know was the 38 combat strength unique unit was supported quite literally by their double support bonuses, making all the Greek assaults futile before we proceeded to shatter their weakened ranks the very next turn, on our way to the bustling city of Bucharest. And with the Hungarian vultures once again circling my kill, Gorgo was also once again panicked into a last-ditch breakout attempt, as my forces responded by slowly tightening the noose of this now besieged city, storming the city of Bucharest. and breaking Spartan power in the Balkans forever. Her desperate counterattacks were numerous and ineffective, allowing my forces to regroup for a final push into Greece proper, which is when I heard word of the exploits of a young officer, Counterattack. Hailing from Bangkok, she used her state-mandated mancock to single-handedly tear down the walls of Bucharest. It was quite the sight to behold, and upon hearing her detailed and tragic backstory, I knew that she was the person who would show the world pain, the one I wanted to lead my armies. And lead my armies she would to our final target of Galati, the city that controlled the porous opening of Eastern Europe, the one that any future Turkish flanking attempt would no doubt originate from. At the same time, we adopted a more efficient form of government to address our current needs of military strength. That, when combined with our new general, meant that nothing could stop these unwavering soldiers. Well, except for one thing. You see, the situation right now is not necessarily to our advantage, situated between two bloodthirsty nations in the Turks and the Hungarians, both of which could decide at any moment to sedate their bloodlust by invading my empire and taking the spoils we won for themselves. To pre-address the threat, I quickly erected an encampment to slow down the Hungarians while keeping a close eye on the Ottoman court in Istanbul. This minimal effort was the best we could do, as eliminating one of the more beloved leaders in the world has confirmed that we would stay diplomatically isolated for the near future. But as they would soon see, this diplomatic isolation was all for the greater good, to stop the Ottoman threat posed to Eastern Europe. But even a more experienced army, having now conquered a much stronger power base, was not enough to stop the Ottomans. Not with their towering walls of Istanbul spelling doom for any brave or stupid enough attacker. We needed a wall breaker, and while my top scientists got to work, we continued to further drill our troops while employing a ranged corps that would stay behind and defend the homeland against Hungarian opportunists. That would not include Counterattack, who after a hero's welcome in the capital was tasked with eliminating the Turkish threat, to whom we still fall behind in every measurable category. But more than their superiority was the fact that our one saving grace, the battering ram, was too expensive. We needed a patron. Thankfully, our blossoming relationship with Jadwiga gave us the loan we needed, as I completely looked past the aggressive 164% interest rate. And so, with our power base secure, an experienced land army ready and willing to take back Constantinople for the Greeks, and the power to topple both the Ottoman defenses as well as their ill-gotten empire, the hour was now upon us. The Turks have for too long oppressed the Balkans with their infuriating ice cream practices and comfy sofas that our hardwood furniture could not hope to compete against. But that is all behind us, as the time has finally come to save Eastern Europe from this Scrooge. We will do that behind the immense strength of the Hypaspist, who nearly penetrates the city's walls with one thrust, behind the experience of Counterattack. The reeling Turks, for their part, were not expecting such a lightning-quick offensive, but despite their setbacks, they still had an ace up their sleeve. Two of them. The first was their envoy they sent to their potential ally and traitor, Hungary. One we managed to intercept before damage could be done, but only temporarily, as the Hungarians would no doubt join the war sooner rather than later. Secondly, the Bosphorus. With such a massive bottleneck, we would only be able to attack with one unit at a time, which would normally spell doom to any invading force, especially when you can park 4 to 5 archers right outside the city. But we were saved by the fact that the warlike Ottoman warband was nowhere near Istanbul, and we would soon find out why. All that matters is that with our decisive military advantage, we soon took control of the Byzantione, and now had the opportunity to liberate the city and cement our status as heroes. If only Theodora wasn't so weak. She would assuredly lose the capital again without Macedonian support, and refuses to allow us to station troops in her borders. Can't imagine why. And so we make the strategic decision of electing to keep her capital under our watchful eyes, until we can vanquish the still powerful Ottoman force once and for all. And we would soon meet that power in the siege of Ankara, alongside a minor obstacle. This giant mountainous natural wonder made it impossible to cross Anatolia and take the heavily reinforced Turkish capital head-on. We need to fork them from both fronts to maximize the amount of units we can bear against the defensive city sporting hills in every direction. But with the open borders required for that flanking maneuver still currently unavailable, I was left with the unsettling reality that I had to free Anatolia from both the Turks as well as the Byzantines. Jealous of our success, they've now decided to support the enemy for nothing more than pride's sake. With the die cast, our special military operation was successful in replacing the treacherous queen with the Lukashenko, as the path to Ankara was now wide open, and the path to my scrotum now lay occupied. But it wasn't going to be easy. Their catapults, city attack, and rough terrain worked to nearly eliminate multiple units before we even got to the city's gates. If we don't take this right now, we might be in trouble. And so, before that, we launched an all-out attack to destroy the walls and limit their retaliation, but we failed to deliver, and instead gave initiative to the revanchist Turks, who, with their bevy of ranged units, focused fire on one of our key attackers, opening up a hole in our lines and our heart. With the startling realization dawning upon us that we were in their territory now, with their settled capital, any more gut-wrenching deaths and we would no doubt lose this uphill struggle, which would inevitably end with the Turks ravaging our homeland, desecrating our Jordans, and forgetting to charge our PS5 controllers after cheating with our wives. And so, with this thought plastered clearly throughout every Macedonian's mind, we could only look forward and charge in a brave attempt that led to the sacking and controller draining of the Ottoman capital. But as we would soon see, the Turks were far from finished, as their mustered army had marched halfway across the world to win back their wives, and most importantly, their Jordans. This was only allowed because their previous target, Georgia, sued for peace and left us out to dry. With our main army in a battle for survival outside the now abandoned Turkish capital, this was the opportunity for a nation like Hungary to open up a second front, which posed an existential threat to our generals. How would we beat a two-front assault when both their armies were individually as strong as ours? While quantity may be helpful, sure, it was quality that would win this day, because our advanced units were tasked with a preemptive strike against the Hungarian nation, who were supported by the Dutch in what would be the most difficult fight of this challenge. Not just because of the lack of shabbiness our enemies possessed, but because back out east, despite the near evisceration of our forces, we managed to eke out a win in the Second Battle of Ankara, as we soon prepared to march onto the next Ottoman outpost. While they regrouped, we head back out west where our qualitative advantage allowed for a lightning-quick strike into Hungary. But soon enough we would be stifled, as their superior numbers were far closer to their front lines than we'd anticipated. This massive army dealt considerable damage to our units, who were tasked with the objective of survival no matter the casualties, at least until a battering ram could make its way to the front. But the Eastern Front was not faring much better, as the Ottomans had just now begun to deploy crossbowmen to effectively slow our progress to a crawl, although it was too little too late, as the city's weary defenders surrendered soon after. As for the Hungarian capital, Mother Nature decided to stand firmly on the side of the righteous, nullifying the Hungarian ranged advantage while the man-at-arms battered down the city's walls. With the city's fly-down, they made a last-ditch flanking maneuver on our back line, making the fatal mistake of thinking I loved my units, not knowing they were going to get sent to a labor camp right after. Because the next turn the city was captured, and Hungarian power had been curtailed but not destroyed, as their massive army hungered for revenge. But despite my selfless sacrifice for Europe, it seems that Hungary was able to get to everyone first and convince them that instead of Suleiman, it was I who was the bloodthirsty warmonger. We needed to end this quickly before their lives become taken as fact. The defense of Budapest started poorly, as their catapults were too strong to eliminate in a timely manner, leaving our now out-of-position units in perfect position for devastating return fire. But as we retreat behind the river line, we get word that the final Ottoman city of Van was now under siege and would soon fall despite aid from Queen Tamar, who too would need to be punished for aiding the enemy. For now though, our focus lies west, as our great general Trungtrack was sent to deal with the city of Linz to eliminate the traitors once and for all. And as we prepared for the final offensive, we just received word that we could now rest easy, as the Ottoman menace, destroyer of civilization and state sponsor of furries, were finally put to rest. But this war wasn't over, not while Hungary and Georgia hosted Turkish sympathizers amongst their ranks. No, in order to end this, we took the effective Western army reforms and improved our Eastern infantry in preparation for their mountainous adventure, which coincided with the attack on Linz. Both Both armies advanced and used their improvements to take out the now not-so-effective siege weapons before laying siege to both cities, which is where the fate of both armies would diverge. Tbilisi was relying on their narrow mountain passes to keep them safe, and thus the city itself was unprepared for a giant ram's skull to topple their not-so-towering walls. And while the fortifications in the west were no stronger, it was the catapults and their numbers that caused immense casualties amongst our ranks. But this divergence in luck wouldn't hold, and would soon converge once again, as after barely surviving a third straight year of incessant bombardments, the men-at-arms entered a destroyed gate into the city, capturing Matthias, and securing victory for the Axis of Good, right before the final Turkish vassal of Georgia too lost their capital, rendering them punished enough to sue for peace the next turn. But despite their defeat, the Hungarians' lies were still pervasive. For example, the Netherlands refused to make peace out of principle, but her empire on life support wasn't what worried me. It was what he thought that caused all those sleepless nights. With their advanced engineering, mastery of the new substance, gunpowder, and 24-inch chrome on their rims, Hammurabi had a wide-open southern flank to invade, and he would surely find misguided allies to aid him in any fight, as it seems our freeing of the Balkans from Turkish dominance has caused wariness and jealousy amongst our neighbors due to our growing strength. And while we were the strongest nation in our now much bigger pond, we were not unbeatable. And because of that, every other nation was looking for the first opportunity they could to knock us down a peg. In order to survive and eventually thrive in this unfair environment, what we needed to do was establish our dominance, which is difficult to do when the Gauls, Romans, and Babylonians all were our equals, and in some cases superior. So our next goal was clear. In order to protect our gains and secure our place in the sun, we needed to overpower every other would-be challenger to scare the rest of the world into submission. But to get to the Gauls, we first need to defeat one of our former adversaries, the Dutch, which will open up the plains of France for Macedonian expansion. The first advance was swift and decisive, as the technologically backward Dutch had little chance of stopping our advanced armies. In the meantime, my veteran southern forces prepared to deal with the gunpowder threat, but the question was, how would our steel even compare to their guns? And that is when we realized that we couldn't. No, in order to deal with their fire, we needed fire of our own, and so we stole and adapted their pike and shots to fit with our more infantry-focused armies. While our forces prepared to fight our most dangerous rival, the siege of Frankfurt went about as flawlessly as you'd expect, with the downfall of Wilhelmina opening up the path to the Central European plains that Gaul called home. With our forces preparing for another preemptive defense that the world has long since disavowed, I never thought I'd have another friend in this heartless world ever again. That was until Jadwiga gave me some pisanki, whatever that is, as a special gift, accepting her flirting and reciprocating, as this developing love story may have warmed my heart to the point where I would even consider stopping all this carnage after my empire's place in the sun was finally secured. But until that is complete, no amount of blessed piss or Anki can convince me to let off the gas after our forces have finally prepared for the final offensive. A preparation that seems to have brought much joy to Hammurabi, a joy that will soon turn to agony when he realizes that the student has become the master. With our forces moving in, we soon discovered that our previous campaigns done at lightning speed would not be replicated, with their Renaissance walls proving too strong to overpower. But hope was not lost, as this is what I have prepared an ace up my sleeve for. With such a stunning success, our armies out west and east were given bombards of their own, while the south received reinforcements, as even with the one bombard, the siege was progressing far too slowly. But this was only the partial success of one front, as it was soon time to deal with the Gauls. And for all their bluster, their military is really nothing to be impressed by, as we sliced our way past primitive forces en route to the gates of Amsterdam. With 2 of our 3 targets at war, all eyes now rested on Rome. But there is a situation. To deal with them, we need a navy, and our naval technology is significantly behind our contemporaries, so for now, we'll have to be content with just 2 fronts. And in one of those fronts, we'd finally broken through, opening up and splitting Babylon Babylon into two, which is when we met something interesting. A regular lord tells us of goods from the east, and trading of which made Persia famously rich thanks to their complete control of the important trade route. Whoever controlled these passages would inevitably control world trade and become too powerful to oppose. But they were too far away to put much thought into, as we still had to focus on winning our current wars, without even mentioning our promise to Oh no. If Poland has come to hate me, then what about everybody else? I don't want to know. And so there's only one path forward. We need to finish off the Titans before the rest of the world joins against us. The first of which is nothing more than a paper Titan with an army stuck in the Stone Age and walls that fall after a single bombard attack. Soon after, we can now begin setting our sights onto Paris with so little resistance that you'd think our gunpowder was mixed with ketamine. It was instead the Babylonian siege of Mosul that would prove most difficult, with their ranged attacks effective enough to silence my cannons. In fact, by the time they even began to make a noticeable dent into Mosul, the defenders of Paris had already been routed by my gunpowder army, and the siege results were not in question. But it was now time for something more personal. You see, with the Polish controlling the eastern steppes, and their true colors having now blossomed, they could allow any manner of horde to push through and flank our three divided armies. Thankfully, they turned out to be a peaceful people, and so with 27 combat strength cities, this war would be over quickly. The more interesting armies were in the west and east, where they each secured their targets simultaneously, but the city of Lyon was a little different from these two targets, because it was a fortress. You see, unlike Poland's vulnerable cities, the Gauls had forests and hills all around, making positioning difficult. And with the Alps to the east, the one countermeasure we could rely on was just impossible. And so, while the Polish cities were taken without much adversity, the Babylonians nothing more than a spent force, Lyon stood strong, forcing us to make peace with Ambiorix, until we figured out a way to flank his fortress. Despite this setback, we still had time. All we had to do was go past these mountains into what the locals call the Silk Road, before we could claim victory in the east and reinforce the struggling west. And so first we kept pushing through the Middle East to Babylon, where we would soon find riches we couldn't even dream of. But more troops aren't going to help us with the Gaul problem. Instead, we need to circumnavigate around them by declaring war on France, and so we must prepare our army technologically and await much needed military reforms. Something unneeded for the Polish cities that were slowly succumbing to the power of gunpowder, as they had just one city left, although it was defended, if only lightly. That means that the only one of our three fronts that were progressing was the one they'd give to a Make-A-Wish kid who wanted to feel like Napoleon. Something needs to be done, something to make our units stronger. Thankfully, our incredible military experience from fighting in every terrain, under every circumstance, reaching the mountains of India and the northern Baltics, gives us a new perspective on military tactics, which we utilize to reform our military, increasing their punching power. This was immediately evident when we completely eliminated the Polish, securing the north aside from one nation. Although the World Congress hadn't gotten news of this fall, as the next turn they arranged for military aid to be sent to Poland, which I happily accept as the embezzling can be used to further fund unit upgrades. But these might not even be needed, as the fall of Tehran ended the first of my three main rivals. But while I could turn my forces around to support the West, beyond this point was something I first thought was only myth. The riches of the Silk Road were no joke, and all the treasures of this luxurious route seemed to originate from India. I needed to acquire this wealth, and so prepare for one last expedition into the Indian subcontinent. But doing that means that the Western army would have to face the Gallic threat alone, and so our one and only hope, the Schlieffen Plan, begins with our declaration of war against the French. This fight lasted about as long as the quickest French surrender, and so our attention was quickly brought about east again as we were tempted once again by a second Indian. I knew I had to stay focused if I wanted all that wealth for myself. I first needed to prepare forces to take out Persia, who was in the way, and don't think I forgot about the Romans, as our naval technology is beginning to progress. And with both our armies prepared, the die was now cast fast as we declare the second war for Gaul with more space than ever before. But going for Lyon even now is a death sentence. We had to separate the Gallic capital from the rest of their empire, and so first on the chopping block is Toulouse. The issue is they can do the same to us and cut off our army, if they can get the Germans to play ball. And so with nothing else to do, my reformed northern army conducted a preemptive strike against the German threat. But there is a bigger Roman threat, and to counteract that, we finally get word that one of our scientists has created the Caravel, a massive ship with a strong hull, but one that was focused on close combat. So I got to thinking, what if we added bombards to the ships? While we sleep on that, the Silk Road campaign had begun as Persia quickly lost their fortress city that same turn thanks to our new general's revolutionary maneuverability. The only nation with any fight in them was the German menace who threw everything at my lone musket man. If only they weren't 2 eras behind. The war front was going well and it seemed like no one could stop our gunpowder army. That was until the two lovers decided to enter the fray. Angry at what they called violations of sovereignty and human rights abuses, they issue a joint war when I least expected it. Rome, like me, is masters of the ocean and almost eviscerates my newly minted navy, as the survivors are left with the gargantuan task of clearing coastal defenses. But as I survey the Roman peninsula, I sense that there may be an opportunity. But to do that, we need more troops. And more money. So further across the Silk Road we go, taking another city as we inch closer to the subcontinent. Likewise, Toulouse was captured in the west around the same time Germany had quickly succumbed to our threat. It seemed that everything was going well until we ran into a problem. Our navy was far too weak to deal with the Romans on their own, and so we needed to overhaul our strategy. The goal is simple. We need to take out Lyon and open up a northern front where a combined land and naval assault of the Italian peninsula can begin. And unlike last time, it does seem that the Gauls are finally a spent force after all these years. Rome is about to be invaded, Persia is dead, and our third army can move east to protect against any nomadic raiders. But there is an enemy missing from our list, and that enemy was Egypt, who we'd prepared a whole new army for just for her. And so with all our holes plugged, the state of the war was obvious. We had the advantage. We had almost won, and after such a colossal disadvantage, who else could say that they single-handedly brought the world to its knees? It was obvious when they turned their backs on me after my decisive victory against the Ottomans that no nation could do what needs to be done to bring peace and prosperity to mankind. That was until now, as it was time for Macedon to finally take its rightful place as the only nation worthy, moral, and upstanding enough to become world hegemon. But to become hegemon, we first needed to subdue Egypt, and the issue is that Dido's in the way. Across the inland sea, our navy begins making its way to the other side of Italy, while our army does the same, having fully conquered Lyon, opening up the Alps. And that couldn't happen soon enough, as while our navy was moving up the peninsula, it seems that Rome has beaten us to the punch and secured the Western Med. Without our navy, the army was in no position to take Genoa and open up the fertile plains of Italy, and so our underfunded navy needed to take the city. Maybe we can spare some forces from the Middle East who had just eliminated Dido, but of course Arabia was also in the way. Despite more wars, they've thankfully gotten easier, as it seemed that the navy was more than capable of taking out a Roman colony, and so the beleaguered veterans up north would soon be reinforced and Gaul's fate was all but sealed. While we sorted our battle lines, the Arabian front began to crack, but unfortunately sand was the only thing these people had in excess, so there was going to be nothing down the peninsula that we can make use of, at least until we corner Saladin's last city like we have with Gaul, taking Ambiorix hostage and ending the reign of the second of our two priority targets. It was now time to march down the Third's peninsula and secure our place in the sun once and for all, splitting off a small force to take Alanum, while the navy and army began their march down the boot. But we wouldn't just be taking cities. Remember that settler we took from Theodora at the start of the game? It was now their time to shine as they settled the Suez, allowing us to eventually move our navy to support the vast Indian campaign when they got the chance. In the meantime, we can use it as a base to ship oil to our western armies, as this black gold was used to make our artillery pieces even more threatening. A discovery that would do wonders for the northern garrison, as it seems that the Norwegians still might pose a problem for our future ambitions. But the artillery has offensive capabilities as well. Capabilities that made us confident and ready to move in on the spices of India in our quest to discover the origins of the Silk Road. Because of his is jealousy at my wealth and my drip. Norway calls me a bitch, justifying my cause for war. Now while this may seem like I have stretched my lines too thin, don't worry, as the Roman campaign was now winding down after both of Rome's power bases in the north finally fell under Macedonian control. But with Rome at just one city, I feel confident in declaring that our place in the sun is now secure. With by far the world's strongest military, strongest science and culture, we can now claim status as the world hegemon to bring peace and prosperity to the world we just conquered. But despite such a stunning success, our plans in this chapter have utterly failed. Because ironically, our antagonism of every nation in our path meant that our plans to secure our empire's security may have spelled our eventual downfall, as we are now at war with the entire world in their last real chance to top us. If they manage to slow us down and get others involved, we're finished. But if we manage to win this world war, then no power will ever be able to challenge Macedon ever again. Eventually, the entire world from the Atlantic coast of Great Britain all the way to the Pacific was soon under our iron grip. We had conquered the world. The old world. You see, there's a whole new world with new people and resources out there. The issue is that this new world was larger than I first thought, with more and more envoys making their way across the sea. What if they catch up to our robot capabilities? What if they outclass us? We can't allow that to happen, and so begin our small colony to watch over the world at the expense of Canada. But while we could bring freedom and democracy to any nation we so desired, with our vast and powerful empire, there was one thing that not even the most powerful empire on Earth could hope to stop. Oh no. As you know, this wasn't the first time I was making this challenge. That one went about as well as this one, maybe even a little better, conquering Europe, Africa, then Asia, and while we were advancing against America, the game stopped working, stopped responding, and stopped my dreams. This time, while we were advancing against America, the game stopped working, stopped responding, and once again threatened to end my dreams. No matter what happened, every time I got to Australia, it would happen. I was on the verge of giving up for the second time in as many attempts. And with less than a week until the release of Civilization 7, I would not be getting a third. And so I slept on it, waking up the next day with a renewed vigor to finally crack the code and solve this problem. But as I was researching the topic, I discovered not a solution, but perhaps the cause to this problem. Too many assets. So I did what the Redditor told me and disabled all my mods, except the God mod. That didn't help, but that's when I got to thinking. Too many assets. Can't handle, and so make an exception. Too many... What is an asset? Something the game processes? Maybe there are too many things for the game to process. Maybe, just maybe, there was too much going on. And the one thing that I could potentially use the God mod to delete, that would delete the most amount of assets per click, and that was my cities. And so I proceeded to delete every city in the old world in a mass extinction event except for my capital. And after seeing the empty husk of the old world that used to be so vibrant, with different fiefdoms squabbling against each other trying to gain the upper hand, I was broken out of my melancholic nostalgia when I realized that I needed to test to see if this would help. And as for the tests, I have just the perfect one. You see, for the last 100 turns, every time I was about to capture a city, the game would lag for a few seconds before taking it. This was typical in my previous run as well, right before the unhandled exception took effect. And so theoretically, if I attacked and there was no lag, then the problem was surely solved. And so I did what I was doing for the last 100 turns, whittling down the defenses of one city with a robot before letting fate decide my future, and it was smooth. Thanks to the God mod, I have made an exception to the unhandled exception. And so now not only could we continue with our plans of world domination, but we could also avenge last game's defeat and finally leave my mark on Civilization 6. With the now allowed Earth satellite revealing all my targets without crashing my PC, the final battle had begun. Quickly, we eliminated the Japanese colony before moving down Central America, taking the heads of the Aztecs as we secured North America totally. The islands of Kupe and Australia were the next to go, and so all that was left to win this game was the mountainous South American continent. And with no better than field cannons against our GDRs, the rest was a cakewalk, as the last city of the last civilization was nestled in Santiago, the Mapuche capital. And after taking the city and defeating the last remnants of other civilizations on Earth, we'd finally done it. There were no more worlds left to conquer. But something was wrong. We haven't won yet. Now, while I could use this fake win as a sappy moment to comment on how there are no winners in genocide, I mean, North America speaks English, not Cree, so no, we deleted the capitals, and so the game bugged out and we had to win a science victory. But this isn't the end. We still have one more turn, with the pre-orders of Civilization 7 coming out on February 6th, and the release of this video being either the 30th or 31st of January. Tomorrow, on Twitch, I am about to embark on the hardest challenge in Civilization history. The goal is simple: beat Civilization deity with every leader and persona, all 72 or 78, before the pre-order of Civilization 7 is released.